Welcome to everyone. This is the third bi-weekly update, what is happening in Myanmar, a collaboration of SEA Junction, a venue on Southeast Asia based in Bangkok, and Irrawaddy, which is main media on Myanmar and the region. And we are very pleased to have again Aung Sao, the chef editor and founder of the Irrawaddy, who will give an update of the main, what has happened in these last 2 weeks, what have been the main developments. This time is a lot to say, in addition to the violence which continue unabated and becomes more and more cruel, as we are all witnessing. There have been major development in the formation of an official government representing the people of Myanmar, the national unity government, and as well we are going to have an ASEAN meeting which has provoked quite a lot of discussion, whether it is proper or improper, since it's not inviting at the moment, it seems, the representative of the people of Myanmar. Aung Sao, please.
Thank you, Leah. This is my third time joining this discussion. I'm very grateful having to organize this ongoing discussion. As you mentioned, Leah, I think there has been a lot of things happened in the last 2 weeks since we finished the second discussion. I just want to say that the formation of the NUG, National Unity Government, is very interesting. Why? Because there are a lot of known and some unknown people. And for instance, Aung San Suu Kyi and President Wu Myint, who both are in detention, remain in the same position as the presidents and state councillors. But also there are a lot of activists who have a lot of international exposures, who also spend a lot of time in the prisons. Also elected representatives being in the government. So compared to the NCGUB, National Council for ASEAN Government in the past 1990s, this government, the formation of this government seems to be interesting and draw a lot of interest. If you look at inside the country, the support, the daily support, in spite of the onslaught, in spite of the appalling the violence committed by the regime troops and the police, and people continue to express their support to the government. This is very interesting, and I think we should acknowledge that. And also, I think with the ASEAN's inviting the Commander-in-Chief, Chairman of the SAC, the General Min Aung Hlaing, to the ASEAN Special Summit discussing on Burma, on Myanmar. I think this is time to also acknowledge that there are other forces, legitimate forces in Myanmar exist. And if not this time, in the future, in the near future, it is very wise to engage in. It is very wise to engage with those legitimate forces and government and a representative and a stakeholders in Myanmar. That should be a message, I think, to the ASEANs. And also, before going to the ASEAN, I would like to brief you a bit on the last 2 weeks, what is happening in Myanmar. And you might have seen a lot of daily protests, but also a lot of killings. But I would like to highlight and point out that Myanmar stands at the brink of the state failure or state collapse. And there are some people who talk about Myanmar, whether Myanmar is becoming like a Syria. I don't want to go that far, but what I want to say is we are at the brink of the state failure, collapse. This is my assessment. But at the same time, the people of Burma, they are very clear that they don't want the return of the military rule. And the regime continue to deploy the ruthless violence against its own people. They are behaving like invading forces. And at the same time, the large population of the government servants refused to work for the regime. The civil servants refused to go to work. The private banks cannot reopen. The regime didn't gain effective control of bureaucracy, also local administration offices in the country, which means they cannot govern the country. They can only govern the country at the gunpoint. The regime continued to, in spite of all that, regime continued to deploy the violence, but they failed to restore law and order. But at the same time, which is interesting is the transformation of the resistant forces. Last 2 months ago, we've seen a lot of peaceful, large number of people, millions of people took to the streets, and an impressive, creative, innovative way of expressing three-finger salutes and position to the illegitimate military coup. But because of the violence crackdown, there's a transformation of the resistant forces, and then we should acknowledge that. We should acknowledge that. There are a lot of armed clashes also taking place in the countrysides, and there are formation of resistant or defense forces around the country to resist the regime and to resist the military coup. And the new form of resistance and a new generation leading the uprising, at least, I think, in spite of all the bleakness, I think give us a hope. I think it really gave us hope that there is a challenge. But looking at Myanmar today, I think you can see that the direction, the trajectory is very alarming. I would say that because of, as I said earlier, the banking system, it's not working. Payroll is a problem. People cannot process. Even in our own stuff inside the country, we cannot make our payment to the staff. And countries under this regime become ungovernable. And I mean, that should be also not just for the concern for our country and our people. That is also should be a concern for a great concern for the whole region. I think ASEAN leaders should take a note about this. And with that, what I want to say is that this attempted coup is failed. It's not winning. And it is now driving millions of people into the poverty. And in Yangon and Mandalay, the supply chain doesn't work anymore. The import and export stall and stop. The healthcare system is almost collapsed. At the same time, every day you can see that the regime is going after the medical doctors and the physicians who were heroes during the COVID period in last year, who were at the frontline heroes as the outside government, and they wanted trying to introduce a measure to prevent COVID-19. And those medical doctors who take part in this protest are now headed down by the regime and being targeted by the regime. In ethnic states, you can also see that the rising or renewed armed conflicts, which is very alarming, and it could lead to the much more catastrophic, I think, problems in our country. As you know, not only the new resistant forces we have over 70 years of armed conflict in our country. So I think there are a lot of, not all armed groups are united, but they have rivalries, they have their own territorial problems, and the regime also deploying the divide and rule or divide and conquer strategy to divide the more. That is very, very alarming for us, for the country, and for the region, and for the neighboring countries. Because of the military coup, also it drives not only the poverty, but also the, I think, internet migration. You can see that after the major crackdown and bloodshed in Yangon and in Shipida, Landaya areas, hundreds of thousands of the migrant, the internally displaced people, they left the areas and they're going home or they go to somewhere else. That is also very concern for us. And at the same time, the last 2 years, according to the Thai officials and Thai intelligence sources, the increasing numbers of illicit trades and the methamphetamines and all this illicit trades has been increased along the border areas and as well as arms smuggling. So the point is, the coup is catastrophic, but the regime is quite alarming that is determined to consolidate the power and to remain in power at all costs, at any cost. I think because of that, I think the ASEAN, I don't have a very high regard for the ASEAN because we have seen that in the past, ASEAN has been used as a shield to protect the previous repressive regime in Myanmar or Burma. But this time is a wake-up call for the whole region and ASEAN. Because of the effects, the consequences are unmeasurable if the regime continue to consolidate their power. That is, I think a very important, I think we have to look at it. Because of that, I think the ASEANs, the UN and Western powers, including the neighboring countries, Thailand and China and India, those countries, I think the message should be loud and clear. It should be loud and clear to the coup makers and military to show the opposition to the coup. Because of the immediate consequences, you start to see that, you start to feel it in the region. And the catastrophic state collapse is happening in Myanmar or in Burma. And also, I think it's important that because of the new formation of the government and NUG, I think it is wise to engage those legitimate forces in Myanmar or in Burma. And because of Min Aung Hlaing, I think it's a criminals. He committed crimes. I hope that the ASEAN meeting, ASEAN summit, I think it will be very complicated in terms of protocol and in terms of diplomatic engagement. Some of my friends make a joke, engage, but don't kiss. Meaning that you have to at least talk to the regime leaders who has the power, and guns. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you don't give any recognition to the regime leader. So this is very important time, even though, as I said earlier, I don't give a high regard for the ASEAN, but there are a lot of people watching ASEAN, how ASEAN will make a move, whether ASEAN is serious, whether ASEAN is going to fake it again. I don't think this time ASEAN is not, I don't think ASEAN can fake it. ASEAN really have to break it because there are a lot of proposals coming to the ASEAN, how ASEAN can play a role in this crisis, in Myanmar crisis, whether ASEAN will, together with the other stakeholders, will appoint a special envoy, and how to interface with the regime and other stakeholders, representative in Myanmar, as well as to open the multi-layer of a diplomatic channel to engage with the actors inside the country. I think this is very important time for us. I think I rather stop here. Before I start, I would like to also update that because we talk about arms embargo a lot and UN arms embargo, whether it will work, but you might see that there are small brief news of regime was buying the arms and the technology. I think about 15 million US dollar worth arms from the Russia, just imported from Russia. So that is also shows that the conflict in Myanmar is much more becoming much more complicated because of other players, external players getting involved. But the point is here is, I think ASEAN, the traditional policy of non-interference policy is no longer working. It is time ASEAN to engage and intervene and to send the message across very loud and clear that they oppose, they don't want this coup, and because of it will have a lot of catastrophic consequences to the region. Thank you very much, Leah, everyone.
Thank you very much for the very clear and straightforward message. So I open the floor for 3 questions to start with. Please give a sign with your Zoom end if you want to, or you can also put it in the chat box. While we wait, maybe I will start with a question about, well, we know that the country of ASEAN, I mean, ASEAN is a representation of the 10 countries. And many of the countries can be defined as authoritarian or semi or pseudo democratic, or, well, there are many names that we can give to the kind of democracy in this region. So being what it is, can you indeed expect that they will take a strong stand against an authoritarian regime? Because it reflects on themselves, or many of them.
I think, Leah, you asked a great question. I think there are some answers in your question. Indeed, because of those authoritarian. If you look at Cambodia, if you look at Vietnam, if you look at Laos, if you look at Thailand, even that are. So we have a authoritarian nature, and then the way that the government behaves in the region. That's why I think last 20 years or since 1997, that Burma joined the ASEAN club, and then ASEAN has always been very soft on the regime, and they have been very naive that things were soft in the country. I still remember 96, 95, when I was in Kuala Lumpur, I asked a question to then Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad about, he was very eager to allow Burma to be member of the ASEAN. So I asked him about what is his reservation, or why he thinks that Burma should be allowed to enter the country. And he only pointed out about economic prosperities. At the time, he just came back from Burma, and he saw that more buildings and people are on the street happy, and he thinks that economic prosperity will bring an stability to the country. But what he did not understand is inside the country, how much the people inside the country deeply resented the military rule, and also how corrupt these military generals are, who have a control over the the resources and the country and the wealth, and they were not easily given to power. So I think this is why the regime in the past and can always dilute, it can always hide behind the ASEAN and then use ASEAN as a shield. And again, this time, and the senior General Min Aung Hlaing, and who now committed the crimes, who almost daily killing his own people. And if he thinks that ASEAN or some ASEAN members are going to protect him and going to endorse him, going to lend him some kind of legitimacy, then we have to make sure that he is wrong. He is deadly wrong. That's why I think this is also a wake-up call for whole ASEAN and ASEAN people. I keep arguing that people in ASEAN have a different way of vision, different way of hope, and different way of thinking way ahead. But those authoritarian rulers have a different kind of version, different kind of vision. This is where I think the Myanmar, again, sadly, is present a case study and a case to be inspired, a case to be take a a very sober assessment and look into it, that what is wrong inside the ASEAN, the system, how the ASEAN system is failing on this country. There are 54 million people live there. And as I said earlier, the catastrophe is coming, having impact, negative impact in the region. I think this is a time that there are a lot of do's and don'ts, that what ASEAN has to do, how to do with the regime. Not only that, how to look into their own, making their own soul searching, I think is very important. I think so ASEAN cannot, shouldn't be allowed to make or fake it. And they have to be they have to demonstrate not only to the Myanmar people, but also to their own people that they are serious about fixing the problems in Burma, in Myanmar.
Sorry. We have a question from Nicholas about whether, do you have a strategy using boycott? I suppose do you means the people in Myanmar have a strategy using boycotts to move the lines?
To move the lines.
Yeah, that is the question. I have asked for clarification actually, but maybe.
Nicholas,
yeah. If you can.
What do you mean boycott to move the lines?
Wait, he's answering. It means we are not English speaker here. We're not native English speaker. At least not me.
People are already boycotting goods from China. But I think this is also very important. We've seen that you know.
Now it's clear. Sorry, to make it so that ASEAN companies will stop supporting the regime. So the boycott towards ASEAN company or even banks in Singapore.
No, right? Yeah, I think the banks in Singapore are always been under this scrutiny and being under the watchful eyes. I think this is important, that how the media and activists inside and outside can educate the people inside the country. If you look at the momentum that Myanmar people have, who go after the China and China products since the military coup, because the China said this is a major reshuffle, and Burmese started to go after the Chinese products and even the boycott, you know, and even they made a threat against to sabotage a Chinese natural gas pipeline. So I think like Singapore is one of the countries, I think, sending a very interesting message. And the Singapore Foreign Minister Vivian is sending a very strong message to the regime. But at the same time, I think that Singapore is the largest investor in Burma. So I think if the misery continues, if the regime continues, I think the boycott against Singapore is plausible, very plausible, I think, because of Singapore is playing with the fire. And then Singapore, it's not China, Singapore is the largest investor in Burma. And that's why I think after China, probably Singapore may be the second that Myanmar people, I don't know how much strategy and a vision or education or information. Education means I'm talking about how much do we understand how the Singapore companies are involved. And we know the very, you know, some of the superficial information about Myanmar regime leaders in the past and present, usually flying to Singapore, then tycoons for medical checkup or medical treatment. And Singapore banks in the Singapore banks, Burmese cronies and Burmese generals always have a savings all kinds of things. So how are you going to, go after all these? If the regime continue to resist, not to give up the power, and then this, I think Singapore will be one of the testing point, perhaps maybe. And also with your question, I want to add something. It's fascinating to share earlier, or somebody else also mentioned that EU imposed sanctions on a lot of individuals last week. Civilian minister in the current regime. But also we should not forget that EU ambassador residence is owned by the former dictator Nguyen. We had exposed about this in 2013 and 2014. The residence, the lavish residence, is rented by the EU ambassador. I think there's a lot of EU ambassadors. Even the current ambassador, I think, still lives in this residence. That residence is owned by the former dictator General Min. So we should explore how much money every month, every year going into the pocket of the generals. At the same time, a lot of international organizations, INGOs, even embassies, the residents, the compounds, you can clearly see that there are a lot of residential compounds are owned by the military generals and their family members, but diplomats and the foreign experts, and they all rented all these residents and live there. And now you can see the EU is taking a more high ground to impose a sanction on the regime, but they forget that they have to leave these residences. So I just want to mention that.
I was laughing, so it's good I am mute, but
no, I think
I am aware of this. Actually, many UN agency, actually someone also, I will not name, but the new offices of some of these UN agency are all indeed property of land property and house property of
exactly
people. So you are very right that I think consistent. I am they will love you, but consistent indeed. Maybe they will have to look for new, different kind of residents. Now we have other question. One is what strategy could be used to stop the violence? And so we know that the violence is continuing in the country, and everyone is really horrified by the number of deaths, as well as by the number of people that are being taken prisoner. So is anything, I mean, I know it's difficult to, and people are trying from outside and inside, but really how to stop this horror so that less people die or are arrested. And then how strong is the unity of all ethnic minority against the junta? And then the third question, there are different views within ASEAN, example, Indonesia, Malaysia versus Cambodia or Laos. Do you think that the pro-democracy state in ASEAN will be able to promote a strong position on the coup? Will they be willing to expose the disagreement within ASEAN, or will they prioritize the consensus and fall in line? So this is related to the question of ASEAN being represented by these 10 countries and they themselves being authoritarian. I mean, will they be able to somehow reach some consensus, the country that have expressed relatively more support for Myanmar compared to the one? And here I want to ask myself, in addition, about the fact that Thailand is not going, what it means, and how you see Thailand positioned in these different blocks within ASEAN.
I think the last question there, we will start to discuss the last question. It's very good questions. I think there's always fear that the regime will exploit the division within the ASEANs. And that's why a lot of activists inside and outside, Burmese or non-Burmese ethnic minorities, calling ASEAN not to invite the regime leader, Min Aung Hlaing. But to me, if he dares to go, I think ASEAN should stand firm to talk to him, to show that they are in solidarity with the people, and the regime must stop the violence, stop arresting the people and the dissidents, and then things return to the normal. And my worry and our concern is, Leah clearly mentioned about Thailand's Prime Minister Prayut skipping the ASEAN summit. That itself is very interesting, because if you look at the some comments and some news articles appear in the some Japanese newspaper, I think last 2 weeks ago, which they cited the Thai ambassador anonymously, Thai ambassador, to say that if the Thai PM is in power, General Min Aung Hlaing is he would stage a coup inside the country, meaning that the closeness, the friendship between the Min Aung Hlaing and some of the establishment in Thailand. This is, I think, quite telling and quite worrying. And then, but instead of Prayut, I think Thai Foreign Minister Don Pramawinai is going, and some Thai observers think it is appropriate for him to go there and to talk to, to attend to the ASEAN meeting. My worry is, our worry is, if you look at Cambodia, if you look at the Laos, if you look at the other authoritarian countries, the governments, they don't really represent their people. And how the regime is going to exploit this ASEAN's policy of non-interference and will somehow present his own 5-point, I think, roadmap, which is one includes holding the election in the next 2 years. And if ASEAN is going to endorse the Min Aung Hlaing's roadmap, I think it is wrong. That's why I think it is wrong, but also I think the pressure will continue. A lot of Burmese people inside the country, sorry to say that, they don't think ASEAN very highly. And not because they think the West or the UN is the best to solve the Burma issue. No, I don't think so. I think because of ASEAN has again and again demonstrated that they have failed. And they are very soft on the issues that exist, not only in Myanmar, but also their own backyard. So I think that's why I think this time is very important. That's why I keep telling that this is a wake-up call. Myanmar is a wake-up call for all the ASEAN member states. And then those countries, even semi-democracy countries and the governments, and Indonesia or even Malaysia or I think Singapore, I think they are taking a very different stand this time. I hope they're not faking it. I think they are taking this issue very seriously. Otherwise, ASEAN will become a club of clowns, you know, and people will think ASEAN is a club of clowns. All the clowns are to live in and stay in the ASEAN. So I think this time is very important for us to say that loud and clear, that opposition to the coup, the opposition to the military leaders, and start to engage with the elected representative and those stakeholders, legitimate forces inside the country. That's the only way I can say that. I don't have anything to say beyond it. Thank you.
So or consensus out of necessity? Maybe.
Yes, consensus out of necessity.
So let's go to the other question, which is how strong is the unity of all ethnic minorities? The one, this is the previous question. I am repeating. How strong is the unity? How you assess? Because now everyone seems to be united, but you also say after so many years there are quite some internal differences and conflict. And the other question was about violence in the country.
I think for talking about ethnic, Myanmar is, I mean, our diversity is our strength. Our diversity shouldn't be our weakness. This is important. So let me repeat, our diversity, our ethnic minorities, over 100 ethnic minorities inside the country living. But our diversity is our strength, I think. To start with, if you talk about ethnic minorities, I think ethnic minorities and then the Burman majority this time are much more closer. That transcends a new hope to us. But if you talk about the ethnic groups, no, they are different. They are not united. Some are warlords. We are talking about over 20 smaller or larger ethnic groups inside the country. We have over hundreds of militia who are aligned with the military. Okay, we are over 100 militia is, I think, understated. Could be more. Even in Shan State alone, there are over, I think, almost 100 militia roaming around and active, but they are aligned with the military regime. So if you talk about ethnic minorities, yes, ethnic minorities are united. If you look at the daily protests taking place, Yangon is quiet now, but spreading in other parts of the country. That includes Shan states, and Karen state, and Mon states. That shows that ethnic minorities are interested. They are showing support. They are even showing support to the NUG. They might not even know who they are, what they are, but they know that they are legitimate forces. But if you talk about the ethnic groups, some of them represent their own people. Some of them are just our warlords. And some are just sitting on the fence. Let me say again, some are just sitting on the fence because of they're looking to do their, sometimes quite disgusting to say that, because of they are looking to who is going to be the winner at the end. They're going to join with the winner. And they cannot even justify their role. They're just looking, sitting on the fence, and they're much more like a very much opportunistic situation. So if to answer your question to get short, yes, ethnic minorities are very united against the military, but ethnic groups are not united. Those groups in the south are different. Those groups in the north is different. And among the ethnic groups, I think there are two largest groups I can identify, that Karen and the Kachin, because we see a lot of fightings and renewed armed conflicts in the Karen states. And because the Karen soldiers are being seen as protecting the protester and publicly supporting the CDM movement, civil disobedience movement. And because of that, you see that there are numbers of airstrikes against the Karen population and along the Thai Myanmar border areas. That forced thousands of refugees fled to the Thai Myanmar border areas. And you can also see in the north, they are in the north close to the China border. There are a lot of groups, Wat, Gogan, and the TNLA and the Kachins. Kachin today is almost daily engaged in armed conflict with the military regime. And because of these two are the outstanding, I think, armed forces at the moment, fighting and engaging, fighting against the military regime. But also the vice president, just to mention it, the vice president who is Kachin, the vice president of the NUG, National Unity Government, who is little known person outside, but he is very much get a lot of influential, and his political background and his support is very much across the board in the Kachin community, in Kachin state. He has a lot of support, not only from the Kachin population, but also from the KIA, Kachin Independence Army, but also from the other political actors. So that also makes the regime very upset. That's why you can see the engagement and a military, military clashes engagement taking place in the Kachin state every day. So that is at least I can answer your question. Thank you for the question.
Still the question on the violence, maybe an update on what is happening on that front, the prisoners, torture, what you know about how they're treated, anything related to that. And then a question about ASEAN member, which may reject sanctions, may argue that they would hurt the people most if Myanmar products are banned. So this is again on the issue of boycott, and this has been said many times that boycott in the end are negative for the people of Myanmar, and ASEAN country may use this as an excuse. Do you agree? This is by a journalist in France, in Jakarta.
Oh, you mean the boycott against the ASEAN products or boycott against the regime?
Myanmar, the boycott against Myanmar products, if done, would negatively affect the people, not so much the generals. And this is always, but of course, it also relates on the issue of sanctions. And that is why always to make clear that are targeted sanctions, they are not general sanctions. But in this case, if there is a boycott of Myanmar products, even if produced by other or with investment from other countries, that may, or at least this is the excuse, may negatively affect the people of Myanmar.
I think the question is important. That's why I like this discussion and forum, because the questions are very informative questions and quite good, and I really appreciate it. And I think, yeah, I mean, we talk about sanction. When we talk about sanction, the targeted sanction, we talk about Western sanction, the UNM's embargo, and you know, we used to have a sanction from the US and the EU, and at the end of the day, people argued that sanction didn't work, and sanction only made the generals, I mean, talking about generals in the past, richer, and the new generation of cronies. And so will it repeat? The question is. So because of Myanmar is a rich country, I mean, in terms of natural resources, we have a teak forest, we have a jade, and we have a mines, and we have a gold, and so those natural resources, with that note, are at the hands of the warlords, at the hands of the military generals, and also we have the two largest companies, conglomerate companies. They are owned by the military. One is UMEHL and the other is MEC. And the US and EU already imposed sanctions on those two companies. You can see that because of that, and the Japanese companies and some of the companies are already freaked out and they are leaving and they're departing Myanmar. So the point here is, if there is a sanctions, we don't want sanction to hurt the population. The sanction should only hurt those in power and their family members of the military generals, and that's why we call it a targeted sanction. So I think sanction has to be will be, whether we agree or not. Sanction is, I think, probably the easiest way to say that we will impose a sanction. We would demand this action to be followed. But whether sanction will work in the long run, if the regime is determined to consolidate the power at all costs to stay or close the door, then the question on sanction, whether sanction will work, will linger, will remain as a debate. But I have never seen sanction, if I may rightly answer your question, sanction from the ASEAN countries to targeting the military and military companies inside the country. So that is something that we have not seen it yet. And if Singapore or Japan or South Korea, some of the countries are already leaving. And if they started to say that they are not leaving, but they are suspending their operation, their work, then we will start to see that, I think, regime leaders will start to think, because regimes think that the ASEAN will stick with them, that only the West will impose a sanction. And they can survive because of the ASEAN companies will remain inside the country, and Chinese will remain inside the country. India, small scale, will remain inside the country, right? So I think there's a new debate about how, I mean, ASEAN should be a responsible stakeholder, and how they could play a role to start to send a message to the regime that, you know, if they prolong to remain in power, what kind of action the ASEAN would take against the regime and regime-owned companies. That is important, I think. I hope that I'm sending you the...
Yeah, so I think you are not worried that this targeted, eventual targeted sanction by ASEAN would negatively affect the people of Myanmar. On the contrary, the people of Myanmar would be happy if finally Singapore and Japan and Malaysia would impose sanctions, just to make it clear 100%.
Yeah.
Yes, so that is the question. Okay, I think there is the last question. Oh, here there is one more. Are you aware of how China is interacting with ASEAN? And with this meeting is China, ASEAN +3, right? China, Korea, Japan. Are they playing a role? They are not visible, but they could play a role beyond the scene. So how is China and Japan? This is my addition, Japan, but I would be interested to know more on China and Japan. How are they playing, interacting with ASEAN in relation to the meeting, but more generally?
Right. Well, thank you for the question. I think without China, we should not end this discussion. There has always been China. China is important. And China wanted the ASEAN to play a role on Myanmar. I think there's a hidden agenda. We should be aware of that, because China always provided a political and diplomatic coverage to the past regimes, as well as these military leaders at the United Nations Security Council. Let me repeat, China always provide a cover or diplomatic cover for the regime, past and present, at the United Nations Security Council. I think that is very clear. Last 2 months, if you look back, China, and along with Russia, always came out to protect the regime. But China, at the same time, wanted the ASEAN to play a role. So there's a hidden agenda. China doesn't want the UNSC to come up with a strong resolution on Myanmar regime. But China, as you know, wanted ASEAN, because China may be thinking that ASEAN is appropriate, because ASEAN has always been playing a non-interference role, and it's always been softly on Myanmar. That's why I think China is always been asking, China always approach ASEAN to play with. That is not a good thing. My point is, we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful how China and ASEAN play a role in this. and how the regime will play between the two. And we have to be very watchful on this 24th of this month when Min Aung Hlaing and the ASEAN leaders meet in Jakarta. I think that is something we have to be careful. And the question about Japan, I think Japan is, I mean, in terms of image, I always want to talk about image, because in terms of image, there is no such thing against going after the Japan, and because we have traditionally enjoyed a strong and longer and a friendship with Japan. So I don't see any kind of boycott or any kind of protest against the Japanese. And that is also a leverage, call it. We always think Japanese and other individuals, not only Japanese, but also other individuals have a different kinds of leverage interface with the regime leaders. We have to use this because there are a lot of, there are some Japanese, influential Japanese former ministers or even Sasakawa Foundation, and they have a connection with the military as well as with the Aung San Suu Kyi. I think Japan can still play a key role, trying to, find a way in the military layer, how to interact with the regime as well as with the other legitimate forces, and to stop the violence and to release the prisoners and to turn back the table. I think Japan can still play a much more constructive role. But also, I think it's important to note that China always see Myanmar as a little brother. And China doesn't want the Western forces and other forces to come to play a bigger political role in our country. That is, we have to keep in mind that China is not very sincere in helping the Myanmar issue to be resolved. China wanted to make sure that the Western interference, the rise of Western influence inside that country, China wants to deter and then prevent and then stop it. And this is something that we have to also be careful and watch out for that.
Okay, so a lot to reflect upon. I think we will all watch the next ASEAN meeting on the 24th and see what is going to happen there and what are all the geopolitical games that will happen.
Exactly.
And the 24th and after, depending on how ASEAN behave. We also know the envoy, the special envoy, is also going to Jakarta. Maybe as a final comment, what is your impression about air going to Jakarta at the last moment? I know we discussed it before, but just to share in more diplomatic terms now, whether indeed it's a positive, but for sure it shows that the ASEAN meeting is a very crucial event, whether positive or negative, it is for sure of relevance for development in Myanmar. So please elaborate on this and then we will end the meeting.
I think it's a very relevant question, Leah, for asking this question. I think it's a fantastic question, but I won't give you the great answer. Because, we have seen a lot of UN special envoys in the past jetting in and jetting out, flying in and flying out of Burma. Again, as far as I remember, if my memory is still good, Razali Ismail from Malaysia, there are a lot of Western special envoys, Gambari, there are, I think, at least 7 or 8 UN special envoys. They completely failed. They completely failed to resolve the issues. So I have a very strong reservation on the current one. I think the UN should have a more of a heavyweight. I think much more. I think heavyweight UN envoy will be maybe much better to engage. But this current one seems to be a little bit underperformed. I would say that, and also she doesn't get a lot of good reception in many ASEAN countries, including in Thailand. So that is a reservation I have, because of I don't have a very much, not like ASEAN, but also I don't also have a lot of high hope on the United Nations, because we have seen a lot of UN special envoys coming in and coming out, and their visit have been diluted, and Burmese people have also strong opinion on the previous special envoys, and they don't have a high hope on these envoys. So I think the current one, Christine Bugner, I think that she would trying with her own limited understanding of Myanmar. I think we're engaged with the stakeholders, but I don't have a lot of high hope on that, her performance and her work. Thank you.
Well, so on this not so awful message, I think we still will watch what is going to happen in few days time, and whatever happen as a consequence, and we continue to hope that the violence and the people, even if we have not talked about this particular update, we remain concerned about the people that are dying unnecessarily in fighting for democracy in Myanmar. This morning, I had the honor to be a participant at the ASEAN People Forum, and I think the message that came out of that was a positive one, in the sense that whatever happened to Myanmar is important for the entire region.
Of course.
The fight of the people, the young people in Myanmar, is an inspiration for the young people in all other ASEAN countries. So even if ASEAN government fail to meet our expectation, the real people of ASEAN may grow more united at the end of this experience.
That is true.
So with this, I think I will close. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
For this very important, and actually there is also a participant from France that probably will talk more with you on, because he represents an organization working on boycotts. So probably there will be further discussion on this.
Sure. Thank you.
On 2 weeks, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.